The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant condemning violence against Palestinians by Jewish settlers on the West Bank this Tuesday, saying in a state of law, only the police and the military have the right to use force. Let's bring in then our guest, Hussein Ibish, senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. There's talk of US pressure on Israel to stop. Looking at it from the sidelines, one wonders what this pressure might be, because there's no real evidence, if you're looking at it objectively, that there's any great pressure from Washington on Israel to stop anything.
Well, I think that's right. I don't think it's become a matter of using American leverage. In other words, no aspect of U.S. support is on the line here. The U.S. is not saying that it will withdraw any of the crucial support that it's giving Israel. In terms of ordnance, Israel is using a tremendous amount of ordnance, of bullets, of rockets, of all kinds of different projectiles and weapons that need to be replenished, and they are purchasing or receiving that from the United States. The U.S. is the supplier of this ordnance. And in wars like this, new, fresh supplies of ordnance are crucial. So the U.S. has immediately that leverage that it could use, but it won't. And at this stage, it's just a matter of putting diplomatic pressure and political pressure on Israel to say, look, not to stop, but to limit the humanitarian disaster. And what the Americans are saying is, you can't behave in the South the way you did in the North, first of all, because too many civilians died in the attack on the North, and secondly, because the whole population of Gaza is now squeezed into the South. So it will be much worse.
Indeed.
And,
they told everybody to go
not.
from the north to the south to be safe, didn't they, when they were attacking
They
Gaza
did,
City,
and now
Jabalia?
Yeah, and now they're telling them to leave the South, right? But there's nowhere to go. And I think this is one of the points the Americans are making. Whether the Israelis are listening or not, I don't know. I do know the Americans are making that point. But how receptive the Israelis are is unclear.
Indeed, you've painted a picture of the US in a position of, on one level, the kind of world policeman who is actually basically the enabler of what Israel is actually doing right now because of the supply of ordnance, as you say, and also diplomatically somewhat hamstrung by the situation, because Joe Biden's already said many times that Israel has the right to defend itself, and it's the same old story that gets repeated. Nonetheless, the Gaza Health Ministry is saying now over 16,000 civilians are dead. More than 70% of those are women and children. The situation on a humanitarian front is no doubt a catastrophe. Where do we go with that? Because, as you're saying, the people looking for safety can't find safety now.
Right. I mean, I think, first of all, I think that's an underestimate, because those numbers, the 16,000, reflect victims or dead people whose bodies have been counted and recovered or noted. There are probably 6,000 or 7,000 additional victims buried under the rubble who have not been counted. They're considered missing. No one knows where they are, but they're also dead. And that's I think, a fairly standard estimation behind closed doors here in Washington and even by the Israelis. So the situation is even worse than the official statistics suggest. There is talk of trying to create expanded safe zones in some areas of Gaza where there's literally nothing. You know, really barren areas in the south of Gaza. Now, on the one hand, that could be useful because there's nothing there. So you could put up tents, and it's safer to be in a tent than in a building in Gaza, because the tent isn't going to kill you if it collapses in all likelihood. The other problem is so the fact that there's nothing there is an opportunity. But the fact that there's nothing there is also a big problem, because how do you get food and water and medicine to people if they started sheltering there? And then finally, who's to say that Israel won't suspect that Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other fighters and militants aren't taking shelter there as well, and then they might decide to take the war there too. So there is no great solution. At least I can say for sure that people in Washington are talking about that kind of thing. But the fact is, people are dying in Gaza right now, while people in capitals around the world, like Washington and elsewhere, are talking. And that's, a very big contrast.
Hussein Ibish, Senior Resident Scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. As always, thank you for joining us here in France 24. We always appreciate your time and your analysis. Hussein Ibish joining us there from Washington.